Jason Moore didn't move to Rockridge Oaks to stir trouble. He moved there because the neighborhood promised peace. Quiet streets, polite smiles. A fresh start after years in a cramped city apartment. So when he finally finished staining his backyard fence a soft slate gray, he thought he was doing something good, respectful, neutral. Then came the knock. Karen Ellison, president of the HOA, stood at his door in wedge sandals and a bright orange windbreaker, holding a clipboard like it was a badge of honor. Without a hello, she cut to the chase. "That color isn't on the approved palette," she said, eyeing the fence like it had personally insulted her. Jason blinked. "It's a fence, in my backyard." She didn't smile. "And the HOA has standards you'll need to repaint." Jason didn't argue. He nodded, closed the door, and sighed. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. The next morning, there was a letter in his mailbox. Warning, non-compliance, a fine $100. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a warning shot. Jason tried calling the HOA, but his messages were ignored. He sent an email, nothing. And just as he was ready to give in and repaint, he noticed something strange. Karen's own backyard was completely non-compliant. A pale purple shed, solar string lights on her fence, and garden sculptures, not listed in any handbook. He snapped a photo. Then another. A plan was forming, one that would turn Karen's judgmental crusade into neighborhood legend. And for the first time, Jason smiled, not because he won, because he was just getting started. The day after the warning letter, Jason took a walk. Not to cool off, but to observe. He strolled through Rockridge Oaks with his phone discreetly in hand, snapping pictures of Karen's supposed perfect neighborhood. He documented unapproved paint colors, makeshift sheds, mismatched fencing, front yard flamingos, solar lights, wind chimes, plastic lawn gnomes, all technically violations under the HOA guidelines, but none of them had citations. Jason returned home, sat at his dining table, and started a folder. HOA Karen, neighborhood hypocrisy. A quiet storm had started forming behind his calm demeanor. By Friday, another notice arrived. This one was labeled final warning. Karen had added a second fine, bringing the total to $200. Jason posted the notice on his fridge like it was a child's drawing and waited. Saturday morning, Karen returned. This time, she didn't knock. She stood at the edge of his driveway, pointing and barking into her phone. Jason stepped outside. "We've been more than patient," she said, clearly putting on a show for the street. "You've had time to comply, and yet your fence remains offensively gray." Jason crossed his arms. "Offensive how?" Karen gestured toward the backyard. "It looks institutional, grim, depressing. People walk past it and feel negativity." Jason couldn't hold back a laugh. "You're upset over a color?" Karen narrowed her eyes. "I'm upholding the standards. You don't get to choose what brings down property values." Jason's tone dropped. "You sure about that? Because your purple shed and gnome army aren't exactly boosting them." Karen's jaw twitched, but she didn't respond. She simply walked off and left the threat hanging in the air. That night, Jason met with his brother Danny in the garage. Danny had arrived with a duffel bag full of spray cans and a mischievous grin. He used to be deep in the underground street art scene before becoming a full-time muralist. "She wants attention," Jason said, unrolling the mock-up. "Let's give it to her." Danny nodded. "You got a projector?" Jason flipped on the garage light. "Even better, I've got lights." They waited until the neighborhood was dark. Danny set up the projector, carefully outlining the design on the fence. The laughter they tried to suppress echoed through the yard as they took turns painting. By 3 a.m., it was done. By 7 a.m., it was legendary. Neighbors gathering for their morning walks stopped in their tracks. Some pulled out phones, others simply stared, speechless. Karen's face, meticulously rendered in cartoonish exaggeration, stood 8 feet tall on Jason's fence. Her eyes narrowed, her mouth twisted in mid-scoff. Above her head, a bubble read, "That fence offends me personally." Below her, a satirical list titled Karen's Commandments was scrawled in bold letters. "No joy, no color, no laughter. Ask Karen before existing." Within hours, photos flooded local Facebook groups. One neighbor posted, "Looks like our HOA finally got its mascot." Another wrote, "Jason's fence is now my favorite thing in Rockridge." Jason stayed quiet. He sipped coffee on his porch and watched the traffic grow. People driving by. Joggers slowing down. Kids laughing. A food delivery guy even stopped to take a selfie. Karen, though, hadn't come outside yet. Not yet. But when she did, everyone would be watching. Jason knew the battle had just begun. What he didn't expect was how quickly the neighborhood would choose sides. And when Karen finally sees the mural with her own eyes, her next move will change everything. Karen Ellison's morning routine hadn't changed in 10 years. She brewed exactly 12 ounces of Colombian roast, ate one plain rice cake with peanut butter, and walked her rescue poodle, Winston, precisely 1 block around the cul-de-sac. Before reviewing HOA emails at her kitchen desk, that morning Winston tugged extra hard on his leash. Something had changed. Karen stepped off the porch, took 10 strides, and froze in place. Across the cul-de-sac, Jason's fence loomed like a Billboard, bare face unmistakably hers, smirked down at her, eyebrows exaggerated, lips twisted into a sarcastic sneer. Her clipboard had been turned into a stone tablet, and each of her commandments glared out in bold letters. She stood in silence as cars rolled by, some honking, others slowing to take photos. "Hey Karen," a teenager on a bike shouted. "Great new look." Karen didn't respond. Her knuckles whitened around Winston's leash. Jason, casually watering a planter on his porch, offered a wave. "Morning," he said. Karen turned on her heel and stormed back to her house. The door slammed hard enough to rattle a neighbor's wind chime. Inside, she placed a frantic call to Paul Langley, the HOA's vice president. "This is defamation," she snapped. "That mural needs to come down immediately." Paul hesitated. "Technically, Karen, it's on his private property. There's nothing in the bylaws that then change the bylaws." She growled. "I want that thing painted over by sundown." She hung up before he could respond, but the day didn't go her way. By noon, the mural had gone viral on a local Rockridge community page. Dozens of comments poured in, neighbors, even strangers, cheering Jason's creativity and calling the fence the best thing to happen to the neighborhood in years. More troubling for Karen were the posts from within Rockridge Oaks itself. One homeowner commented, "Wish I had the guts to stand up to the HOA like this. Jason's a legend." Another posted a selfie with the mural captioned, "Day one of the resistance." By evening, someone had left a lawn gnome on Jason's porch with a tiny protest sign, "Down with clipboards." Jason laughed when he found it at 8 p.m. Karen arrived with 2 HOA board members and a folder of printed violation codes. Jason met them at the edge of the driveway. "Calm but ready. This is your final notice," Karen said, holding out the papers. "If the mural isn't removed by tomorrow, we'll begin legal action. You're violating Article 9. Section B." "Already read it," Jason interrupted. "And I also called a city zoning officer this morning. She confirmed it's protected as art. First Amendment." "Sorry, Karen." Paul Langley looked visibly uncomfortable. The other board member stared at his shoes. Karen's lips thinned into a white line. "You're mocking the HOA, mocking me." Jason didn't blink. "You made this personal the moment you handed out citations like party favors. You wanted attention? Now you've got it." The board members left awkwardly. Karen lingered, seething. "You think this makes you clever?" she hissed. "The HOA has power. I'm not going anywhere." Jason tilted his head. "Good. That way you can enjoy the view." Karen didn't reply. She walked away without another word. Narrator. The neighborhood had seen her face for years. Stern, watching, judging from behind a clipboard. Now, they saw it every day, painted 10 feet tall. And with every laugh and every selfie, something inside Karen began to unravel. But Jason didn't know how far she was willing to go to take back control. Not yet. By Monday morning, the HOA printer had run out of toner. Karen had spent the entire weekend writing up citations. Every detail of Rockridge Oaks was suddenly under a magnifying glass. Flower beds spilling onto sidewalks, untrimmed hedges, non-regulation mailbox flags. Even a kid's chalk drawing on a driveway earned a written warning for unauthorized artistic display. It was clear to everyone this wasn't about order anymore. It was about revenge. Jason watched it unfold from his porch, sipping iced tea as neighbors walked by, waving envelopes in disbelief. "You too?" one asked. "Got to," said another. "One for a cracked driveway, one for a wind chime." "I've had since 2008. Within 3 days, over 20 residents had received citations. Karen called it a long overdue cleanup, but it didn't feel like cleanup. It felt like a purge. Jason wasn't surprised when a second fine landed in his mailbox. This one claimed his mural violated community decency standards. He laughed and dropped the notice into a shoebox marked Karen Mail. But not everyone was laughing. A mother of 2 down the street broke down in tears after being fined for her porch lights. An elderly veteran was told to remove the flagpole he'd flown for 20 years. One family had their backyard fire declared a hazard. Jason knew it was time to act. That night, he called a neighborhood meeting. No official HOA stuff, just word of mouth and an open garage door. Nearly 30 people showed up. Some brought lawn chairs. Others brought snacks. All of them brought stories. "She cited me for using a non-neutral paint color," one woman said. "It's white, just not her white. She took pictures of my backyard," said another. "Isn't that illegal?" Jason stood in front of a whiteboard, marker in hand. "Karen thinks she can weaponize the HOA handbook. But if we band together, she loses her power. What she's doing isn't enforcement, it's harassment." A neighbor raised his hand. "So what's the plan?" Jason grinned. "We do what Karen hates most. We get organized." Over the next week, things began to shift. Neighbors began comparing citations. Dozens of inconsistencies were discovered. Jason helped file formal challenges. He printed out a copy of the HOA bylaws, highlighted every contradiction in red, and mailed it anonymously to every home. Then came the mural expansion. Donnie returned, and with the help of a few volunteers, they added a second panel. This one showed Karen standing in front of a giant HOA rulebook with a magnifying glass and a blindfold. Behind her, Neighbors were ducking as she hurled fines. Like ninja stars, it was sharper, funnier, even more detailed, and it enraged Karen. The very next morning, Karen held a closed-door HOA meeting. The boardroom blinds were shut tight. Security was posted at the door. An off-duty cousin of hers. Apparently Jason wasn't invited. Neither was Paul Langley, the vice president. Outside, a dozen residents waited. Karen exited an hour later, flanked by two allies. Eyes locked forward like a disgraced politician. She said nothing. Later that evening, Paul knocked on Jason's door. "I think they're planning something," he said. Karen pushed through a motion to revoke homeowner voting rights for anyone in violation of HOA code. Jason blinked. "That's half the neighborhood." Paul nodded. "She's trying to consolidate power. She wants to rewrite the bylaws." Jason's expression hardened. "She's not just fighting a mural anymore," he said. "She's fighting the neighborhood itself." Lines were being drawn. Fences, literal and metaphorical, had become battlefields. But Jason wasn't backing down, and Karen wasn't letting go. The final straw came on a windy Thursday morning. Karen had just sent out her latest round of violations. Over 40 this time, but it wasn't the number that set the neighborhood off. It was who she targeted. Marta Delgado, an 80 widow who had lived in Rockridge Oaks since it was just a dirt road and a promise, received a notice claiming her flower garden was an unregulated attractant to wildlife. Her crime? A few sunflowers and a birdbath. When word got out, the neighborhood lost its patience. Jason found out from a neighbor who came to his door, shaking with frustration. "She made Marta cry," the woman said. "The garden was planted by her late husband. It's been there for decades." That night, Jason didn't organize a meeting. He didn't have to. People just started showing up. Folding chairs, drinks, phone flashlights, pointed at printouts of the HOA rulebook. Neighbors shared stories. Stories that stretched back years. Quiet bitterness had been simmering under the surface long before Jason moved in. Karen had ruled for so long, no one thought it could be challenged. Until now. Jason stood in front of the group and held up a piece of paper. "This is a petition," he said, "to call an emergency vote for HOA leadership. If we get 2/3 of the homeowners, we can remove Karen from the board entirely." A murmur swept the crowd. Some were hesitant, but most were angry and ready. Signatures poured in over the weekend. People who'd never talked to each other were suddenly knocking on doors, trading stories, helping one another dig up old violation letters. It wasn't just about Jason anymore. It was about everyone who had been bullied into silence. Karen, meanwhile, doubled down. She sent cease and desist letters to homeowners participating in the petition. She accused Jason of harassment, even went as far as to post a lengthy letter on the HOA bulletin board accusing him of inciting civil disobedience and slandering a woman of respected leadership. But the community wasn't listening anymore. In fact, they were laughing. The mural had taken on a life of its own. Local artists came by to touch it up, add subtle references to HOA grievances, even embed inside jokes only Rockridge residents would understand. People started calling it the Wall of Truth. Then, a local reporter caught wind of the feud. A short story ran online titled, "Fence War in Rockridge, How a Mural Toppled an HOA Tyrant." It wasn't just funny. It was going viral. Karen tried damage control, sending a letter to the reporter demanding a retraction. It didn't work. The story only got more clicks. By Wednesday, the petition had reached the required number of signatures. Paul Langley called an emergency vote. Karen tried to delay it. She claimed the vote was invalid due to procedural misconduct, but her objections fell flat. The meeting was set. Friday night, Community Hall. One item on the agenda, Karen Ellison's removal. Jason arrived early and took a seat in the back. The room filled quickly. People brought popcorn, homemade cookies, even folding chairs when seats ran out. No one wanted to miss it. Karen entered last, flanked by her remaining loyalists. Her chin was high, but her eyes were nervous. The vote was held by secret ballot. It wasn't even close. Out of 78 homes represented, 61 voted to remove her. Her reign was over. She stood there, trembling, trying to find words. But the room was silent. Not cruel, not mocking, just ... finished. Paul cleared his throat. Effective immediately, the board will initiate elections for new leadership. Thank you all for your participation. Karen left the building alone. Jason didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He simply walked home under the porch lights of a neighborhood that finally felt like a community again. Karen Ellison didn't sleep the night she was voted out. She sat in her living room in silence, surrounded by carefully labeled HOA binders, dusty awards from past years, and a glass of white wine that remained untouched. Her phone buzzed with messages sympathy from the few loyalists. She had left, but most of them stopped answering by midnight. Her title was gone, but her rage wasn't. At 3:17 a.m., Jason's security camera caught a shadow creeping along the side of his yard, hooded, gloved, holding a canvas bag that clinked with metal and glass. It wasn't just anyone. It was Karen. She had waited weeks for the neighborhood to sleep, for Jason to lower his guard, for her chance to silence the one thing that humiliated her the most, the mural. She crouched at the base of the fence and pulled out 2 heavy cans of black spray paint. In a sweeping, unhinged frenzy, she started defacing it, crossing out her own caricature eyes first, then the words, then the tablet in her cartoon hands. Her movements were erratic, wild. It wasn't just about erasing the image, it was personal. She was trying to erase the memory, but she didn't know the camera mounted on Jason's roof was motion-activated and streaming. Jason's phone buzzed in the dark. He rolled over, groggy, checked the notification, and bolted upright. The app showed her face. Karen sprang over the yard, sweat glistening under the porch floodlight. Jason didn't call the police. He didn't even go outside. He simply pressed a button. A recording from a speaker mounted on the edge of the garage kicked on. It was Jason's voice, pre-recorded and timed to the motion sensor. "Hi Karen, you're on camera. Might want to wave to your fans." Karen froze mid-spray. Her can hissed and slipped from her hand. For a moment, she looked up at the camera like a deer in headlights. Then she bolted. She stumbled through the bushes, dropped a second can, and disappeared into the night. Jason stood at his window, arms crossed. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He waited. By morning, the mural was smeared with crude streaks of black, a smear over the eyes, a gash across the lettering, but the base image was still visible, still recognizable. Danny showed up an hour later. "Want me to repaint it?" he asked. Jason shook his head. "No, leave the damage." By 10 a.m., he had uploaded the full security footage to a cloud drive and linked it to a QR code. Then he printed that code on a weatherproof sticker and added it to the bottom corner of the mural. When neighbors walked by and scanned it, they watched Karen destroy the mural herself, caught red-handed, hoodie, slipping, face unmistakable. The video spread faster than the mural had. Even local news picked it up. They ran the clip under the headline, "Ousted HOA leader vandalizes fence she once fined." Karen denied it, of course. "It's a deepfake," she said on a poorly lit live stream. "Jason's manipulating the neighborhood. He always has." But it was too late. Jason filed a police report. The footage was too clear to dispute. Karen was charged with misdemeanor vandalism and ordered to pay restitution for damages. The irony. She now owed Jason even more money for damaging the very image she'd once tried to ban. By Friday, Danny had returned and cleaned up the mess. But instead of repainting Karen's face exactly the same, he added something new. Karen now stood with a paint can in one hand, a black streak running down her cartoon forehead, and a speech bubble that read, "Maybe I overreacted." Jason didn't comment. He just added a new gnome to his collection, placed right below the fence, holding a tiny sign, "Free speech wins." What Karen tried to erase only made the story stronger. And now, her downfall wasn't just painted, it was documented, archived, and immortalized in a way no clipboard ever could be. A week passed. The mural was once again a neighborhood favorite. Jason kept his head down. He didn't throw a victory party. No smug interviews. No final jab at Karen. He figured it was over. Until Paul Langley showed up with a cardboard box. "I didn't want to keep this," Paul said, "but after what she did to your fence, you should see it." Inside were HOA records Karen had stashed in her garage, documents she apparently tried to throw out before the vote that removed her. Paul had found them after she vacated her position and never came to collect her board files. Jason rifled through pages, expense reports, policy drafts, surveillance photos. Wait, he stopped. One photo was of his backyard, taken weeks before he even moved in. Another was a zoning map, with his property lot circled in red. A typed note was paper-clipped to it. Unapproved structure location. Former violation unresolved. Jason narrowed his eyes. "She had this before I even painted the fence." Paul looked uncomfortable. "Karen fought hard to keep that lot off the resale list. Said the previous owner left without resolving code issues. Truth is, there were no violations. But she flagged it anyway. Tried to block the sale for months." Jason flipped to the next page. An internal memo. Recommend delaying sale of 237 Pinewood. Potential conflict with green space expansion plan. He looked at Paul. "She wanted to take my house." Paul nodded slowly. "Karen spent the last 2 years pushing a proposal to extend the neighborhood park. Your backyard was key to that plan." Jason sat back, stunned. Karen hadn't hated his fence because of the color. She had resented him the moment he bought the place. The fence's mural, everything after, was retaliation for interfering with her plan. There was more. A spreadsheet titled HOA Development Proposal, 2025 listed estimates for green space, conversion, bids from landscape contractors, and projected increases in property value for homes adjacent to the new park area. One of those homes, Karen's, she stood to gain over $80,000 in resale value. If Jason's property had been absorbed into the park, that's why she had tried to drown him in fines. That's why she weaponized the handbook. The mural hadn't started a war, it exposed one. Jason scanned everything into a digital folder and wrote a simple post on the neighborhood forum. Some stories go deeper than they seem. Karen's campaign wasn't about paint. It was about profit. Here's what she never told any of us. He attached the files. By sunset, the post had over 100 comments. Neighbors were furious not just at Karen, but at the idea they had nearly approved a park plan that was really a personal real estate flip. She lied to us for years. One wrote, "I voted for that park," said another, "I feel sick." Jason didn't say much. He let the files speak for themselves. Karen, however, did respond. She sent out a mass email to the HOA mailing list, calling the documents taken out of context and accusing Jason of conducting a calculated smear campaign to undermine community progress. Nobody bought it. The next morning, a for sale sign appeared in Karen's front yard. No announcement, no farewell, just the quiet click of a lockbox and a realtor's card. Jason stood at his kitchen window, watching her pack boxers into the trunk of her car. No one came to help. No neighbors waved goodbye. But Jason didn't feel like gloating. He felt done. He walked outside, past the fence, and knelt to add one final detail to the mural. A tiny scroll of paper in the cartoon Karen's hand, rolled up and tucked into the painted clipboard. Its label, Secret Park Plan. Sometimes the fight isn't just about rules or fences. It's about what people do when no one's looking, how far they'll go to protect what's theirs, or steal what ISN single quotes. 3 weeks after Karen moved out, Rockridge Oaks felt different. The tension was gone. Neighbors who once barely nodded now chatted at the mailbox. Kids played in the street again. Lawns had more color, fences a little more personality. The bylaws were being rewritten this time by a committee, not a queen. Jason's mural still stood, and now, it was more than just a joke. It was a symbol. Proof that sometimes a fence can hold back more than just noise. It can hold back corruption. Then came the envelope. It arrived on a warm Saturday morning. No return address, just Jason's name in tight, stiff handwriting. He opened it at his kitchen table, expecting one last fine or bitter goodbye. But inside wasn't a letter. It was a single photo, black and white, old and grainy, showing the same street he lived on decades ago, before it had curbs, before the trees were full. And in the center of the photo, standing in front of a wood post, was a young Karen Ellison. On the back, in blue ink, "We built this place from nothing. You think you saved it, but you just changed it." Jason stared at the words for a long time. He didn't feel angry, just puzzled. Karen hadn't wanted power for its own sake. She genuinely believed she was preserving something, an idea of Rockridge Oaks that only existed in her memory. In a way, she wasn't trying to destroy the neighborhood. She was trying to freeze it. Jason folded the photo, placed it in his drawer, and stepped outside. He found his neighbor Clara watering her flowers. He waved. "You busy this afternoon?" She smiled. "Not if it's another mural meeting." Jason laughed. "No, just thinking about finally painting the other side of the fence. Thought I'd ask for some ideas." She nodded. "Community, mural, exactly." An hour later, half the street was in his backyard sketching ideas. Someone suggested painting every house on the block. Someone else wanted to add portraits of the neighborhood dogs. Even Marta, the 82-year-old gardening warrior, offered to paint daisies across the base. Jason stood back and watched. What had started as a protest was now a canvas for something better. Danny showed up later, paintbrush behind his ear, grin wide. "You turning into a neighborhood hero or something?" Jason shook his head. "Just the guy who owns the fence." As the sun set, Jason added one more figure to the mural himself, quietly in the corner. A new version of Karen, not the cartoon, not the satire, just a simple portrait. No clipboard, no speech bubble, just her, looking out toward the painted houses with a neutral face, not smiling, not scowling, just present. He didn't tell anyone he added it, didn't need to. Sometimes the villains in our stories are just people clinging too hard to the past, but that doesn't mean they win. Because when a neighborhood comes together, they don't just survive bad leadership, they grow beyond it. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't a war, it's a better fence.